Hey, just a quick note about the audio on this podcast. I did have some technical issues on my side of the audio. Richard's is great, but I did do some post-processing to try to clean it up, but it is still a little bit echoey. So start with your volume down a little bit and then adjust it from there. I did want to go ahead and keep it uploaded because there are some great things in this, some great content, and I think it's an overall great episode. So take a listen. Hope you enjoy the podcast.
Welcome to Maxed Out Man, helping you become the man you were made to be.
Hey guys, this is Kevin Davis from Maxed Out Man Podcast. This is episode 11. Today we are talking to Richard Husseiny. After spending 16 years coaching Olympic athletes, he helps impact-driven professionals who are lost with direction and self-doubt to identify and stop repeating negative behaviors by providing proven process to unlock the incredible clarity to become more effective, have greater impact, and to be of better service in their life. He does a 7-step transformational coaching program. That probably was easier to write than to say, but
it's actually a three-step. But
okay. So we're down to 3 steps. So, hey man, that's kind of the formal bio. But go ahead and give us your story. We email back and forth, and I know that you are in a particular niche for coaches, but everything you do is, I think, inspirational and educational to pretty much all men. We're trying to inspire and educate men to be better than what they are and kind of maximize what they're, for our branding, maximize their lives and try to do the most what they can. So I'd love to hear your story. You have some really cool, inspirational stuff. So I can't wait to talk to you.
Thank you very much. And thank you for having me on. So I used to be a coach. That was my main part of my career up until just 2018. So what that means, what I used to do, physical performance, physical preparation of Olympic athletes. So across multiple different sports, from professional soccer actually to diving and acrobatic sports, snowboarding, and I worked in China as well. Very grateful for my career. And up until sort of 2015, I was laser focused on that career. And I think many listeners might be able to resonate with this in the sense of my career was everything. And I didn't question that. And, my relationships, my hobbies, my life outside of that took a back seat. And to be honest, I didn't really see a problem with that at the time. And so 2015, 2014, late 2014, my mum was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And early 2015, I left China, left my job, left my living situation, and came back home to give her end-of-life care, which is a sad story, and also has been the most transformational experience of my life. And I would say to anyone, just even in that part, we'll all get an opportunity to be at the end of life with someone, and what a privilege it is, And so that put me into this, I guess, gave me huge spiritual awareness. And all I mean by that, on a simple level, is just awareness of self. Why do I think this? Why do I do that? Why do I believe that? And it wasn't a conscious choice. It was just a choice that I just on this thinking process of questioning everything. And, that one of the biggest realizations was I'm going to die one day. What does that mean? And so from 2015, I was grateful I didn't have to work at the time. I didn't have a job anyway, and just this huge reflection and all of that inquiry really started to highlight to me that I was using my jobs in professional sport as a veneer to hide who I was. Just because, for me personally, I had a very, very low self-worth, very low opinion of myself. Got another bit to this story that I lost my dad at 16. So he had a stroke when I was 13. He was an alcoholic, heavy alcoholic, and died when I was 16. And the only point relevant to this story, I suppose, or my story, is that I've become really interested in how men associate or assign meaning to role models or to success or whatever it is. Because, my career, I was just so driven to support the best athletes in the best way. And I was so tied to their achievements. It wasn't me doing it. I was just a part of the support team. And my identity was so heavily tied up into that. And so, really, so kind of life changed after losing my mum. And from someone who is so, I couldn't stop, not I couldn't stop, but I was so interested in reading research around performance training and all this kind of stuff. And like literally overnight, it stopped. And I just had this huge, like I just wanted to understand myself more. And so I left in 2018, and I've been working in this type of space since then. And only at the end of 2021, I started to think, I guess, diving more into myself, because on paper I was subjectively successful, but I felt very, low self-esteem and anxious. I didn't understand that I was anxious, and that's the thing. Only with this reflection did I begin to learn about that. I was unskilled in my emotional landscape. I didn't understand how, it was either put the mask on, be happy, be angry and aggressive, and there's not much in between that, which I think is a classic sign of many, not all men, but many men in society, because we're just not taught, we're not shown, it's not perceived as safe. It's seen as a weakness to do that, or to feel feelings. And so, so I started to reach out to kind of old colleagues or friends, and what turned out to be just an area of interest, it's turned into kind of my work, really. And I've official interviews, over 150 now, from all men. The women of wonderful, really talented women work in sport. I can only see it through the male lens, and they certainly have their own problems and own kind of nuances to challenges working in that type of environment. But I only see it through the lens, and it's just blown me away. Like people, I guess, relating it to your audience, the people I've spoken to have been highly successful. Like they've worked with the best teams, best organizations, best athletes, achieved all these things. A common statement would be, I've supported athletes to reach Olympic medal, to championship success, whatever it is, and they've waited for this emotional rush to come, and just never has. And it's like, well, what does that mean? Am I successful? And I think maybe, and I'd love to hear from you, like, what is success? What is success? I got strung along with it. And not to say it's anyone's fault. It's just there's such onus, there's such focus put on winning and results. And I think sport particularly, it's this shiny, from the outside looking in, it's this shiny, glamorous area to work in. And on one level, it is really fun, but it's just a job. It's just a normal job, and has its own problems. And, in fact, 90% of it is pretty run-of-the-mill, very ordinary, just a day job, turn up. And the fun part, maybe 10%, maybe 5%, I'm grateful that I went to Olympic Games, I've worked to help athletes. And so when you're in the stadium, that's amazing, but it's such a small moment. And it's not even my moment, it's the athlete's moment. And it's just, so hopefully that's given you a bit of a background of what I'm doing and why am I doing it.
Yeah, I mean, I think that everything you're saying is whether you're, we always use this example because I'm very partial to the trades, welding, plumbing. My wife does a ton of that stuff. But I think whether you're a welder, a plumber, electrician, high CEO, Olympic athlete, coach, I'm convinced that all men have major self-esteem issues, and that drives most of our behavior, whether it's posturing or success-driven and all that. And so it sounds like that's, and I'm sure the athletes themselves do you feel like that kind of living vicariously through the athletic performance of someone else, because you get the like surface level stuff, but you don't actually get the emotional. I mean, there are emotional highs, but you kind of get that brief moment. Is that kind of what you see with some of these coaches?
Yeah, like you many coaches were failed athletes, so they stay in sport. And when I say failed athlete, didn't make the top level, wanted to be professional and couldn't make it.
Failure in their mind, not necessarily.
Exactly that. Yeah. And then, assign such meaning to, there's such insecurity in professional sports jobs, and like there's such high competition. There's in some sports more than others, but for example, in soccer, a new manager can come in, get fired, a new manager come in and just get rid of the whole staff. And so there's such insecurity in jobs. There's a pressure to prove your impact. So whether that's and that's objectively, so through results or through performance measures, whatever that is. And the idea is then, well, okay, well, I need to work. I want to support an athlete to win a medal or blah blah, because that's perceived as successful. But certainly in my career and many of the conversations I've spoken to, and I think, well, I'll ask you in a minute. What actually is success is the connection from coach to athlete. And an example of that would be, two examples would be an athlete coming back from a serious injury. They first competition back and they have an amazing game. And after that moment, the athlete comes to the coach, say, "Thank you so much for your help." It's not about the result. It's not about them scoring or whatever. It's that connection. Thank you. You're valued. Yeah. And I think another example, that's a common one, same thing, one coach was saying about at the end of a season, MLS actually, and an athlete who didn't really have a close relationship came up to him at the end of the season and said, "I really value the work you've done with me. I'm really grateful for helping me." And that's why people do it. It's not for the medals, or it's the connection. And I wonder if this perceiving success. You're talking about tradesmen. Most tradesmen that I know have got their own business, and so the pressure of building a business and being, I know my friends literally who are tradesmen, who there's this, what size job have you got? How many workmen have you got working for you? How many, kind of in this, like you said, this sense of this cultural low sense of self-worth.
Yeah. Yeah. Cause they don't necessarily stand 3 electricians up at the end of the day to have them 1, 2, and 3 on the podiums and give them medal, which is probably good. But there is, I think internally we do measure, and it's funny because I have a sign that's right behind me that says Success Redefined. Yep. And that's kind of one of my tenets with this whole thing is exactly what you're saying, is how you define success. But I think men so often, no matter what they're doing, and I'm actually not a competitive person. Like I play golf and tennis. I kind of did those sports that are less team oriented. And I'm out there to have a good time. I just am not one. I don't really care what other people think necessarily. I mean, we all do, obviously, at some level, but I'm not one to measure my own worth based on what someone else is doing. But it is funny that you say that, because it's always what kind of job you have. I have 10 employees. Well, he has 12 employees, and all of this. Have you how many jobs? So I do a lot with detailers, car detailers, and it's always like, well, I'm booked out until June, or I'm booked out until September. It's like this whole, dick measuring contest, as we say. And I think what that does is that drives, because if that's, I always see, I'm in a lot of marketing groups and different groups, and they're always talking about, stupid words like hustle and grind, and it's success based on money. If your success is based on money, you will literally never make enough.
Never.
Because it's whatever that next level is. If I get the 7 figures, then why am I not at 8 figures? And then why am I at 10? And all of that stuff. So that's for me, success is defined as, and I've been there. I'm early in my career in the corporate world, which is probably 25 years ago now. Early in the .com boom. I traveled, 6 days a week and was making the rounds and going up through this internet startup and all that. And it came to a head where I literally missed the first 6 months of my first daughter's life. Wow. And just about cost me my marriage, honestly. Some stupid mistakes and just bad timing and, being absent. And part of the reason is because I had no idea what the hell I was doing. If you have young kids, if you've had if you're father of a young baby, we literally don't. Most men don't have, and women don't either, but they seem to have that genetic predisposition to that care. Plus, they've carried the baby for 9 months. But because I didn't know what I was doing there, I leaned towards work, and the successes I was fine. And so thankfully, I basically ended up saying, look, I can't travel anymore. I can't come in early. I can't work 6 days a week. I need to be with my family. And luckily we recovered and saved the family. And, the ironic thing, and this is where I try to encourage men to take these steps, is I actually got a huge raise, more responsibility, didn't have to travel anymore. And so it worked out very well. But my success is based on the fact I have two grown kids, 25 and 24. They're successful, employed, happy. I've been married almost 28 years, happily. It gets better all the time. I do have, some success in terms of I run multiple businesses and have some financial success and security. I mean, it's all up and down when you're an entrepreneur, of course. But so that's for me success. Like I don't really look at my bank account and say, well, I hope that this is bigger than my buddy Mike's, or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. No, you said so many things. A quote I saw the other day for success. A definition of success is liking yourself, liking what you do, and liking how you do it. On Maya Angelou, and I think exactly that. I've got my daughter is 5, so I'm kind of further down the path than you, or further before that you are. But like to me, success is how do I show up for her? How do I show up for my partner? Because like you said, there's all. Like I totally hear what you're saying. Like the mothers have the intuition; they've carried the baby. There's this intuitive sense, but I think we have that too, and it's allowing ourselves to feel that. And certainly, where I was years ago, proving myself through the objective. Or like, if I do this, then this looks like this, and I can be. Rather than, I think success is how I hold myself when my wife or my daughter is just in a rough spot, and that regulation of self. Amazing person to check out. I don't know if you have heard of him, but Dr. Joe Dispenza.
I'll have to look it up.
And anyone who can listen to someone who's really breaking down the assumptions of what's possible as a human. And I guess I found him because part of my breakdown, I suppose, there was grief, but then I had I was told that I had an autoimmune condition, and so I had half my thyroid removed, literally almost 2 years after my mum passed away. And so this breakdown in physical health, breakdown in emotional health, and
which for someone like you who's an athlete, I mean, you're an athlete yourself, and I'm sure in terms of health and working out and all that kind of stuff.
But on the surface, kind of at the time, yes, objectively fit. So run a certain whatever, lift certain weight, whatever. But emotionally, just nowhere near it. And I think that's one of the messages I try to get across is you can eat the best food in the world, you can be as physically fit as possible, but if you're not looking at what's underneath the surface, that's driving our thoughts, feelings, and actions every single moment, and which is hard to do. And I think that's where, certainly as me, as a young parent, I think that the hardest thing about parent to me is staying as awake as possible. And what I mean by that is, what am I transferring from that I don't want to transfer onto my daughter? And of course, I'm going to transfer things that, what I think is good, my daughter might have to shed one day, and that's part of life. I know that, but trying to not be automatic and try and be very mindful about the messages I'm giving her, and my wife is the same. But like that emotional, like understanding emotional self, and which is a journey in its own.
I joke and say God gave me daughters because I just would not have been I'm a girl dad. Like that's how I'm built. Little boys, I don't like them.
Same, absolutely same. Yeah. I'm so glad I have a daughter.
Yeah. And so how do you see, obviously my role, and I'm obviously I'm 15 years behind or ahead of you, almost 20 years ahead of you in terms of when my girls grew up, is trying to really teach them how men should treat them. That was kind of one of my objectives. Of course, I want to make sure they have value and they're strong, I always joke because when they got to be teenagers, I'm like, I always tell my wife, man, this is what happens when you raise strong-willed, independent young women, because you want to murder them when they're about 14. At least I do. But now, and like one of the things I try to do with my wife is I always open her car door. I always open the door for her.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just a sign of respect and love for us, that whole chivalrous thing. I grew up in kind of Oklahoma, which is very chivalrous, or was at the time. What do you think, being awake and present, can you give me some examples of kind of how you go about raising a daughter, a 5-year-old? She's just kind of figuring out, she's a person, if that's the right term, but she's just kind of figuring herself out.
I mean, before I start, I think I'm figuring this out every moment. I know nothing. All I can do is
I don't either, and I'm totally 5 years into it.
For my wife and I, just to try and model what we're trying to instill. You can say all you want, but they're watching all the time. And so an example of that would be, if my wife, you brought it, how something along the lines of how you said something along the lines of the relationship with men, I think. And I think, if my wife and I have a disagreement, then have disagreement in a way that, we're lucky that, we're on the same page, my wife and I. And so, and so to have that disagreement and to show how a disagreement, as best as we know, is managed. And it's not about not having or repressing, and not the other way as well, exploding and, but just to have a healthy disagreement. And then just, raising a daughter, I'm just trying to be as present as possible, listening to her, seeing her, and being confident with boundaries. She is, because I think one of the things that I see in the coaches, so many have not got boundaries with themselves. And I think boundaries, especially a young child, is important. Now, you can be too narrow with those boundaries for sure, and I think allowing them to be but I think that it provides a container for them to just be free. And so, and again, everyone's perception of that is going to be different, but just trying to be. So I heard someone say 2 words you need to remember as a parent: to be firm and to be kind. Mm-hmm. And I think there's lots of power in that.
I think one of the things we're doing on the continuum of parenting that I see with, we work with young couples, and my wife does some different stuff where they're around young moms and young kids, and there seems to be this movement now to where we're very concerned with the opinions of a 3-year-old, 4-year-old about their lives, 8-year-olds, whatever it happens to be. And there has to be a balance between no, you're 3 years old. Last week you decided you wanted to be a unicorn for the week. You're probably not able to make, huge decisions in your life. Let's tone that back. And I like that balance that you're saying in terms of, we're not here really to be their best friend. We're here to be advocates, teachers, and, to love them, but also to, make them, help them to be productive members of society. And I always told my girls that, one of the big rules that you can live life by is don't be an asshole. Right? Like if you which you can apply to pretty much every aspect of your life as you're making decisions. But I like the idea of being kind but firm, setting those boundaries. And again, we're all just making this crap up as we go along. And what I found was I taught my girls a ton of stuff, and they pretty much, they didn't really go the direction that I thought that they would go, which is fine. It's like you said, we really don't know what we're doing. I'm interested in particular. Your wife is American. I'm interested. First of all, I'd be interested to know, because I'm sure being international that you've dealt with men of all different nationalities. I'm interested to kind of get a sense for the differences in men across cultures. That would be one thing I'd be interested in. And also, it sounds like you guys are on the same page, but I'm interested to know what that effect is between, being married to an American as the mom and then you growing up in the UK with your own unique situation. I'm interested to see kind of, is there a parenting thing? This is just for my own edification, basically.
So if we start with the parenting one, I guess my wife has traveled a lot and I've traveled a lot. And so both of us lived in lots of different cultures. And so we're just very aligned in what we think. Like our birthdays are 3 days away. We're very aligned, and so there are some things we don't disagree. But I think the main thing is we're talking about it. We're not so dogmatic in one perception. Like we're always trying to review and get clarity and perspective on what we're doing, and like all our decisions are joint. Now we have different styles of parenting for sure, and I think that's just different between a mother and a father, and I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
But we're also similar, and we're also kind of I think it's a nice balance. I think if we were to stop reflecting and to stop assuming that we've got it nailed, I think then that's where things would go wrong, or worse anyway, and I think we've kind of chosen a different schooling system as well. So rather than the British mainstream, we've gone with Montessori, which was a purposeful choice. And I think from the start, we've always been thinking like that, and not to devalue the mainstream. Like there's some really powerful point. We've been through it. I've been through it, but it just seems this intuition about both of us had around, well, is there a different way? Is there a better way to go? At least at the start, and just again, we're an evolving process and reflective. And I think just to have a partner that you can have those ideas, and it's not dogmatic, and it's not, you can review everything, or everything is always up for review, and it just allows us to have to freedom. I think one thing you said about kind of, well, I know there's certainly a book, How to Raise Children Who Aren't Arseholes, or something like that along the line. and I think it's so important, isn't it? The one thing I'd say with that, though, is I think what that makes me think is, the question I still ask myself, am I doing this to look good? Or am I doing this because it feels good, because it feels it's the right thing? And I think sometimes you're saying about, or, we've spoken about getting people to like us, or I think that's such a hindrance, such a problem for many people in general. But I think in the people I'm working with, the men I'm working with, it's like fearful of reprisal, or fearful of saying the wrong thing. But I think sometimes, difficult conversations need to be had, and they just have to be said, and we can't do anything if someone is then going to start to lash out at us and think we're an arsehole, for example. Kind of, I think maybe they do, but does that mean it's absolute truth? And I think there's an alignment to that, an inner alignment to that, and I'm struggling to put it into words, but I think values and purpose and kindness and compassion, if we're aligned with that and we're delivering a message that just needs to be, because sometimes it just does, especially in a professional setting, and not worrying about that, just doing our best in any given moment, being aware that we're doing our best in any given moment. And if we get things wrong, then having the courage to apologize and to put your hand up, say, look, I've got this wrong. Yeah. And I think that's just an interesting space, which is not easy. I know that.
I apologize to my girls pretty much on a daily basis when they were growing up, which I think is important, because it's not me being the dad does not make me right, necessarily. And so I screwed up a ton, and I think that they've, hopefully learned that, mistakes can be made and all that. But
and because otherwise, let's give them the freedom to make mistakes. And because mistakes is such a failure, such a terrible word, isn't it? Because it's just another step in learning, isn't it? And I know that might be cliche to say that, but it is so true. If you've got the freedom to make a mistake, to try something, be an experiment, just be a scientist in your own life. And,
Yeah.
it's just, you can course correct and just these little adjustments rather than maintaining this perception. Another thing that's coming out from all the work is many men are keeping up this idea of story or this perception of they're the guy who can keep their shit together. Like that's such a common statement.
Yeah.
And you're saying about differences between coaches and across countries, I guess. So in Asia, typically, this is my experience from living there and working there, Asia, there's they save face. So they don't like conflict, which creates a big problem in professional and personal setting, because many times people, when I was working in China, they'd say, oh, yes, yes, but they're not really meaning it, but they're not allowed the tools or not given the tools to question authority in inverted commas, like for whatever reason they saw Westerners as an authority in that field, and they're not my words. But so it would be, or if I was trying to challenge a head coach and the person I was working with was have to deliver that message because I didn't speak Chinese, they would find that they wouldn't be able to deliver that because even though it's coming from me, it'd be, so yeah, that's common in Asia. I would say between America, I've spoken to a lot of people in America. There's a lot of similarities. I think the hustle, the grind culture is a bit stronger in America.
In the dumbest possible way.
Yeah, which is, again, it's just, and I think that's just fed to us, isn't it? I think there's a wonderful book by Michael Singer called The Surrender Experiment. Now, it might appeal to some people or not, but I highly recommend checking out if this sounds interesting to you. But the idea of surrender to what is, not to be, not to not try, not to not strive, not to have visions and goals, but if you're going a certain way and life throws you something, go with it. Surrender to it. Well, this has come up for a reason. I'm just going to go with this and see where, and still have your focus on where you're going, but just to trust a bit more in the universal whatever is going on here, because certainly what I've experienced by practicing that, again, it's easier said than done sometimes, is that things just open out. Like things just open out in ways that we have this idea of where we want to go or where we think we're going, but sometimes if you can go with it, it takes you to a very interesting place. And my journey up until this moment is an example of that, of kind of what I started to be an inquiry is now my work, and is getting very busy because it's needed. But I would never have thought this, 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I never would have thought I'd be doing what I'm doing now.
Yeah, I like the phrase, work with what you've got. Start from where you are. And I'm kind of weird because as an entrepreneur, and kind of a serial multipreneur or whatever you want to call it, I pretty much expect failure on everything I do. So because and not like, oh, I suck at this, but I expect that whatever I do is going to be, something is going to go wrong that requires pivoting and changing. And I hate the word pivot; it's a bit cliche, but to really, work within the parameters that you've been given, and those parameters shift pretty much on a daily basis. And so being able to shift around that and work within that parameter and realize that, failure is going to happen. My wife tends to be more of a perfectionist, so she's not good with failure. Like, she is very measured with her words, very measured with her actions. And some of the conflict we've had over the years, that I'll just embarrass the crap out of her because I will say something, it'll just come out of my mouth. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll just apologize later if it's wrong, or if I just said something stupid. We've had to deal with that over the years. But how have you, so that journey for you, and I want to talk a little bit about kind of fatherhood and that kind of thing from your perspective, but how is your journey? So not everyone, not all men are able to deal with failure and to change that path. And one of the things I'm trying to kind of do through this project is help men to, start from where they are and make those little changes. What are you teaching your guys on how to do that? And obviously you're in a coaching setting, dealing with people in the athletic space who tend to be more driven and all that, but I think all men can benefit from that. What can you give some practical stuff? I mean, I know you probably have it, but
yeah, I mean, with regards to change, I think the most it's never we need pain to change most often, and so it's one thing to say, oh, I'm not quite happy here and I want to get there. But until the negative energy is that strong in where we are now, we're not motivated to move. And I don't think we can change, but it's often, I mean, my example is grief, it's just, and so just to understand that, okay, well, what resistance is in my life right now? Where do I want to get to? What am I unhappy with? And then to realize that process of change is going to be undulating. And so, there's a disruptive thing. Now, one of the models I like is the Virginia satire model, and it's this. There are a couple of stages. I'm going to get it up to describe it, give you something to work with. And so, so simply, you're at, like, the first stage is like a state of familiarity, like where we are, we're comfortable. Doesn't mean it's easy, but we're in this state of we're happy to suffering in this moment because it's not bad enough to move. I don't know. Think of a job or a relationship, oh, it's all right, it might get better, but it does,
like the level of pleasure or lack of pain is greater than the pain of keeping whatever I'm doing.
Yes,
is not greater than the pain associated with the change.
Exactly
required.
that.
Okay.
Exactly that. And so it's familiar, and not to say it's wrong, but like it's familiar. And then something happens. So whether, I don't know, a relationship finishes or an illness or we get fired or something like that, something significant happens, and we try to hold on to that life before. Oh, if only, COVID, perfect example. So many people said, oh, if we only could go back to pre-COVID, rather than, so many people said that. And I understand, that's a complex subject in itself, but so like trying to go back to that old way of being. And then when we realize we can't go back to that old way of being, we slip into chaos. Chaos being trying to grab onto all these kind of like, well, and which forms this sort of like, we're trying to get this transforming idea. And so we'll start to be opening our minds to like trying new ways, maybe, looking at new careers, maybe, a new relationship, maybe different lifestyle patterns, whatever it is. And then we kind of hold on to one of those things, something sticks, and there's integration, and we become a new self. And I think that definitely modeled it for me. But I think one of the biggest things of change that I'm finding is that there's an assumption, a hidden assumption underneath the drive to change. So an example that would be, my example would be, well, I realized that I didn't want to work in professional sport anymore because of many different reasons. I was unfulfilled. Just wasn't what I just wasn't interested anymore in the idea of helping people chase medals. It just wasn't purposeful for me anymore. Mm-hmm. But that meant me is leaving. And so it's, just find a job or do something. Now, away from the practicalities of what I actually did, underneath that was an assumption that, well, if I come away from sport and if it fails, it will prove that I'm not good enough. Whereas if I can stay in my comfortable zone of this athlete and that athlete, it looks like I'm really successful, irrelevant to what's going on in the actual real world. Like It looks successful. And so there's always these assumptions underneath. And so I would encourage anyone who's looking to change to try and be aware of, well, what is the real pain that you feel? What are the feelings? So there's a practicality of where someone is, job, relationship, whatever, use those two. So, but what is a feeling? A sentence I like to kind of use to help people would be, how would you fill this in? I want to go from feeling this to feeling that, so that.
Yeah.
And so a lot of people I get to fill that out, and it might take a bit of time to get the feelings, not the logistics of it, but the feelings of it. What do you want to do? How does that feel in your body? And that to me is quite a good start point, like something practical for if someone is listening to this and thinking, I'm just had enough of life, like I want to change, I need to do something about it. Yeah. Where are you? Where are you feeling now? Why do you want to change it? Where do you want to get to? And what does that allow you to do? Most of an example would be, someone would say, I'm feeling lost, I'm feeling unfulfilled, I'm feeling anxious, I want to go from feeling anxious and lost and unfulfilled to one of freedom and calm, so that I can be present with my family. That's an example statement that I've heard.
Yeah.
And, to get calm and free might mean that, again, what are the labels that we're trying to defend to stay in that old place? My label was a coach. I'm a performance coach in Olympic sport. That was my identity. It was everything to me, but it was keeping me trapped. And so what are the stories that we tell ourselves that are keeping us trapped in the moment, which get, again, it's easier. Oh, just leave that. But it's kind of give it time to start to unpick. I don't know if that offers you something. Hopefully it does.
No, definitely. And I think one question about that as a follow-up, I think one of the things that as humans, as men especially, we like to do is, first of all, most men, I love change, but most men don't. I think most people don't. But one of the things we tend to do is kind of straddle that, I like the image of having a dock and a boat.
Right.
If you leave one foot on the dock and one foot on the boat, then eventually you're going to end up in the water. And when you were leaving professional sport or Olympic sport, did you like have in your mind, well, if this doesn't work out, then I can always go back? Or do you feel like you need to fully commit to that next, stop looking? Because a lot of times we want to leave that as the backup plan. Do you feel like that's important?
No, I don't think do things blind. But I do think there's value in just taking the plaster off, taking the Band-Aid up, just ripping it off. And because there's the drive, there's the motivation, there's fear in that as well, to step away from a career that's all I've known for 16 years. I didn't know what what do I know? Initially I was trying to fit into my old career, but I set up a performance training business, and it's just in my heart, it was nothing. I didn't want to do that at all. And I get, kind of holding on to the past. That's what I mean. But I think there's value in just going for it. Now, I think you can be calculating in that. Mm-hmm. If you're going to go into a different job or different, then the financial side is there's basics to be taken care of, isn't there? Shelter and food. And if you can get a plan for that for the first 6 to 12 months of some, maybe a little bit of savings or some kind of structure, some plan to be able to support that bridging the gap, then I think that's important.
Yeah.
Whether that's through a partner. For example, like my wife was the primary money, salary earner. And I think, again, that label, for initially I was, my pride was damaged by that. My ego was struggling with that because before that it was me. And then to lean on her, but I think that's where a partnership comes in. If you're in a partnership, and because it's not forever, and it doesn't mean I'm not successful. And at the same time, you're working together. You're a team, and for something for the future. And I think that's, to work together as a team if you're in a position to be able to do that. But I do think there comes a point, like you said, to just embrace the change, and just to dive in. And because if you do that, for me, like if you've got 1 foot in, 1 foot out, or 1 foot on the boat, 1 foot on the deck, you can't invest all your energy into that new project, into that new thing. And, it doesn't mean that you're productive every single day, but the idea of just creative thinking, researching, kind of getting clear with an idea, rather than I think it's that drive. Once you cut yourself free, it's scary, but also liberating, because, right, let's do this. Let's enjoy the adventure.
Yeah, it's a matter of kind of risk mitigation a little bit. I do like, the whole side hustle thing is kind of an overused term, but I think if you are in a position to where you're employed, or for example, and you want to make that change, the side hustle can be a logistical way to build some of the savings, start to build your education, learn what you need to learn. I don't think it's smart for, if you've got $50,000 in savings in the bank, you decide, and you have no restaurant experience, for example,
right.
I'm going to go open my own bar in, Key West or whatever. It's like, that's probably not a good idea. So, doing the side hustle method to, at least get a sense of, is this right for me? Can I gain the experience? Who do I talk to? How do I understand what this is all about and all that? I think that might be a good approach. And then at some point, obviously, you've got to get in the boat, so to speak. And my daughter, who is a paramedic in Atlanta, she's a young paramedic, so really good at her job, loves what she's doing. But she started talking about going to medical school, which is, admirable. I love her drive and all that. But I said, have you spoken to any doctors? Have you talked to, because she kind of wanted to do ER medicine and all that. And so I'm kind of trying to help her understand, make sure that this is the right path. And she's like, well, I've got this one doctor that I've talked to and he loves it. And I'm like, well, I know about 15 doctors, thanks to the American healthcare system, that have gone into landscaping and restaurants, and they hate their job, and so that would be something. Talk to other people that are involved in what you think you want to do, so that you really understand kind of what the human aspect of it is.
I think that's really important, a really great advice, because I can tell you, like I said, for sport, on the outside it looks really shiny, but it's just a job. What are the problems with it? And I mean, I think that's really, really great advice. And it doesn't have to be a long research project. I think just having a few conversations, reaching out to people, and I think, and also not to just to get a rounded view. Don't listen to the first person you speak to, trying to get a few different, because they might have had a bad day, and you're like, oh, I'm not going to do that. And but I agree with that completely.
Yeah, definitely. Just look at and kind of see what other people and their experiences are. So we have a similar background a little bit. My parents had some drug and alcohol problems. My mom did, and dad did also. You said your dad passed away when you were 16. And it doesn't, given what I know about alcoholism, my guess is that he wasn't tremendously helpful as a dad, up until that point, especially you said 13, he had a stroke. And so that definitely affected his health. But I'm curious what you learned about being a man, how you learned what it meant to be a man, what kind of thought processes you went through, what kind of experiences and challenges you had. Because I know for myself, being living with a single mom who was completely absent, would disappear for days, drug and alcohol and all that kind of stuff. I had a really difficult time understanding not only what it means to be an adult, but what it meant to be a man. So it's taken me a long time to figure that out. And I'm 50 now, so I'm still, and we'll continue to figure that out. But I know a lot of guys, given our society, kind of have that similar experience to where, and I think young men now are really having a hard time because we don't have these men teaching boys how to be men,
Yeah, no, a really great question. And my dad was, a whiskey drinker. He was 60 when he had me, and he was Egyptian, and he came over from Egypt when he was very young, and was getting away. He had his pain. Obviously, clearly he had his pain, and he was a very loving man when he was there. When he wasn't there, of course, he was not, and never physically violent to me. But him and his partner used to kind of row a lot. And I suppose what stood out to me from such an early age was I just didn't want to be like that ever. And only the last 8 years have I started to learn how to be a man. Since grief kind of broke me down. And children as well, like my daughter. Like I know what type of parent I don't want to be. So let's create the best version that I know how. But I think how to be a man, like I've tried, and I think most men can resonate with this. I've tried the alpha type of male, like some of the professional environments, the sporting environments. I don't think you can get much more alpha than many of those. And it just didn't sit with me properly, I could be there, but I just was never comfortable with it. And it just, do you know what I mean? When I say banter, so joking around, and I think there's an important part. It's a fun part, but I think so many of the conversations up until 30. So I'm 44 now, 45 this year. Before 8 years it was so superficial and so, what you think, just so girls and money and stuff, and I just had enough of it, and it just wasn't fulfilling to me. And so learning to be a man was just really starting to listen to myself. What do I want? If I don't want that, what do I want? How do I feel? And that's been a long journey to get through. How do I feel? One, to recognize how I feel, and two, being able to allow myself to feel it, because sounds like for you, and certainly was for me, like, any kind of feelings, that was this like the Batman shield would come up, sort of this defense, and I was a master at that. And
we take those and shove them as deep down as possible, right?
Yeah. This mask, a friend of mine has a company called Men Behind Masks, Men Without Masks. And I think these masks are these veneers of the smiling face or the confident or the successful, but underneath there's this woundedness, and everyone's got their own unique woundedness, not one worse than the other. And it's subjective, isn't it? And how do you deal with that? But I think meeting my wife, I'm so grateful to have met my wife. She's taught me how to love. Before, in relationships, I was too scared to fully commit. Like, I'm divorced from a previous, and I was just thought I was committed, but never really committed. And that would show up in just this always unsure, always holding a bit back or a lot back, never able or willing to really open myself up to what I truly thought. And so I think,
which is only sustainable for so long, right?
Yeah.
Like that's how you end up with those broken relationships, is that whatever veneer you put on, unless you're very, very good at it, which some of us are, it's not sustainable. That's eventually that will begin to, just like an old piece of I've got a piece of furniture from the 1800s that has veneer on it, and half the veneer is cracked and chipping off, and that's what happens to our personal veneers too. You can't sustain that for 50 years. This is why people get married, 4 or 5, whatever time, because maybe you can sustain it for 5 to 10 if you're really good at it, but eventually it's just going to break. You're not going to be able to do it.
Yeah, I absolutely, and just the physical and emotional consequence of that are, like in my case, chronic illness. Because you're not being truthful to you and your authentic feelings. And that might sound, me years ago was, don't be, that's a weakness or whatever. But I think feelings we're designed to feel them. And they're such an important thing to feel and express. And I think that being able to, it's freedom. That's freedom, to be able to feel in the moment, to be able to share that feeling, and to be able to allow that feeling to pass through. Look at my daughter now, and I know you've experienced with yours. You see a young child. That's how maybe their baseline is joy, and then their rage or sadness or whatever it is, but it comes up and through them out, and then they're back to baseline joy.
Right.
And we as adults, men and women, learn to repress that. And so I think learn to be a man has been connecting with that very felt sense of feeling and emotion. And I know 100% from the research and what I've done, 150 men that I've spoken to, men are craving emotional connection with other men. And these are men that operate in those high alpha environments. In those environments, I know for a fact that men on the outside one guy, 6'5", built like just a specimen, I've had these conversations with. I know that's one example, but there are many examples like that of coaches or athletes that I've spoken to who are talking exactly like this. And it's who goes first, who has the courage to open this conversation. So podcasts like you're doing now are just so powerful, because I know men are looking to hear this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's I think it's difficult because first of all, I think men, and myself included, you see that, and they joke and say embracing your feminine side, but it's embracing what is more of a female trait, which is being able to be open and honest about your emotions and being more emotional. That's just how most women are geared, and men are geared that way too. But I think we're taught that we're not allowed to do it.
Yeah.
And I think what, unfortunately, and I think it kind of creates this vicious cycle, is I think that we're in a society now that says, well, it's either one or the other. Alpha men are toxic. My shirt right now says masculinity is not toxic. Some men just suck. And it's like, there are some bad men out there, but masculinity in and of itself is not the problem.
Mm-hmm.
And to your point, it's probably alpha masculinity as a mask without the emotional aspect tied to it. So I think what you're doing is super important, because you can show, because you're not, I can't see all of you right now, but you're an athletic, fit guy, masculine at outward appearance, which is good. You're not, I don't know, you're not an effeminate man. So it's difficult if you're getting this message from a more effeminate man, because it's stereotypical and, all of that stuff. But I think that your message of being able to show that, hey, you can have the alpha aspects, the leadership, the protector, the provider, all of those things that we're made to do as men. But you're missing a huge component of your personality if you're not doing, not embracing the emotional side.
Massive. I think in so many areas, like connection with our children, with my daughter, connection with my wife, the intimate connection with my wife, like it just opens out this incredible thing. And even, Aaron Rodgers, the Green Bay quarterback, kind of been interviewed recently. He's been on his own journey. And like the best thing he says now, like the best thing I can do for my teammates is to model unconditional love. Like, yes, he has to deliver with the skills and the tactics and that kind of stuff, but everyone's going to screw up. Like, I need to be able to model unconditional love for my teammates to get the team to be operating in its best way. And I think that's, more, again, people like that who've got these, one of the best quarterbacks in history, I think, is delivering that message. And I think that's what I mean. It's everywhere. But when you start to hear it, you start to see it everywhere. And I think even the men who are on the far end of not, not anywhere near this and are still living the old way, like there are wounds under that person. There's wounds doesn't make it right, whatever they're doing, but there are wounds under there that if a society and culture could adapt, would allow that person to look at their wounds in a supportive way. How that happens, I don't know, but
it's not necessarily let's sit back on this psychiatrist couch and bitch about how bad our parents were necessarily, but it is a matter of I always try to look at it from a pragmatic standpoint, which is, hey, this is what I have to deal with. Let's examine some of that in a way that it, in the real logistical way that it affects my life on a daily basis. And then let's use that again, like we're talking about, as the jumping off point, and work with what you've got, and then try to do that. I think one of my challenges, and I don't know if you see this, is that I always tell my wife, hey, she gets pretty much all of the best of me, which I think is great. However, that doesn't leave a lot for me to actually need other men in order to kind of satisfy that need. And so I don't have a lot of guy friends. I have a bunch of friends. I don't have a lot of friends, that I can sit and have those kind of conversations with. I think there's a lot of guys that are kind of in that same situation. Hopefully they have a spouse or partner that they can have that vulnerability with. But I think it's difficult for men to reach out and have those kind of relationships with other men.
Yeah, which I think, I mean, I know, but I think it comes back to modeling. Like if, you're doing what you're doing and I'm doing what I'm doing, I think if more of us can model this, it gives, it's not it's just seeing people operate in a way that, wow, I want, he looks so free. I'm not saying I've got it nailed. I haven't got it perfect at all, but I think there's a different way of doing it. And I know, like I said, I know men are craving that, and a different way. They're tired of the old way, of the old paradigm of what it is to be, supposedly to be a man, and what that means.
Yeah, trying to redefine it for sure.
Mm.
Well, go ahead.
I was going to say there are just 3 questions that I ask myself not most days, but regularly, to help me kind of like, how do I to help me stay aligned as best aligned as possible. So the first one is, does this situation that I'm getting aroused, like irritated by, or whatever is upsetting me, does this inform me or does this affect me? So inform me means, what are the actual real data I can see? So for example, silly example I like to give is, well, the WhatsApp text message. I've sent a text message to ask someone a question. They've read it, double ticks, and they haven't got back to me. That's the facts.
Yeah.
So the rest of it is making up. Oh, well, then why haven't they got back to me? They obviously don't like me. They obviously don't think I'm saying the right thing, or whatever. Stories. So I'm making it up. Right. So it's informing me. So it's informing my physiology. I'm getting an anxious, a physiological response. So that's the lowest hanging fruit that we can all address. Mm-hmm. And so breath work or some form of presence practice that you can down regulate our nervous system. Second question is, am I trying to be effective in this situation? Am I trying to be right? So effective being, or am I trying to kind of this collaboration? Or am I trying to, for example, my daughter, I know the quickest and easiest way to, pack a bag. But if I say that, I'm trying to come across right. I'm not trying to be effective. I'm not allowing her to grow and find her way that might be just as good. So allowing her the space to grow. Another example. And the last one is, well, what do I want? If this situation right now is not what I want, what do I want? Rather than focusing on what's wrong, what do I want? How can I create something that can allow this to come happen? Now, you said something earlier and just made me think about, well, they're the 3 questions that I the fourth one would be, the last one, what am I pretending not to know? Which is a pretty hard one, because it's usually meaning I'm trying to ignore the situation that I need to own up to something, or I need to maybe go down a more challenging path, leave a situation, or whatever it is. I don't know. But they're the 4 questions.
Yeah, I love that. Hey, I'm really appreciative of your time. This is like genuinely like a really cool connection to have been able to meet you and to have that connection. I think that's it's exactly what we're talking about. Connect with other guys and really begin to have some good conversations. And you're thousands and thousands of miles from me. We're doing this over the internet, but to be able to have kind of a genuine connection conversation is really meaningful for me. So I appreciate that. I appreciate your time. I don't know if you have any other parting words. I think your 4 questions was a great place to land, but I'd love to hear, let's find out, how do we get in touch with you? If people want to work with you, take your masterclass, go through those 3/7 steps. menbehindsport.com. menbehindsport.com. There's a website, Men Behind Sport on Instagram, and then Richard Husseiny on Twitter. They're kind of the main places you can find me. And I encourage anyone to, anyone who's driven, very driven in their profession or in their life, just to check out the website, because the topic might not relate to you, but I think to hear conversations from people who you'll see some real examples of the types of things the men in sport are experiencing, and I think more than anything, just to know that you're not alone if you feel that, and connecting to that is the first step to kind of realize, well, I don't need to live this myth of normal. Yeah, because I saw you may want to dismiss it because it's within a particular demographic niche, whatever it is. But just reading through some of your stuff over the last couple of days, I was like, hey, this is something that really resonates with all men, or can resonate with all men for sure. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to kind of staying connected to you and see how things go. Thank you so much, Kevin. I really appreciate it. Thank you. Have a good night. You too. Okay.
If you're looking to really maximize your life and become the man you were made to be, head over to maxedoutman.com and get your journey started today.